We were not allowed to be texting, not allowed to be chit-chatting about anything. That felt really icky to me. There was an intentional divide that was happening. They were like, this is the one time we are going to politely warn you. Next time, it's going to be a real big problem. I literally responded with, I am a whole adult. We are all adults here. You don't get to tell me who I can and cannot communicate with. The very second my agency asked me to stop communicating with my intended parents during the legal process, I knew immediately that we did not have the same goals. Their goal was to get a contract signed, and my goal was to come up with a plan with my parents that worked for everybody. The agency wanted that contract signed immediately. And the less chitter chatter about it, the better.
Surrogacy agencies love to talk about support until you actually try to talk directly to the family you're caring for. Kelly Copeland has done it 5 times, domestic, international, through agencies, and independently. She's seen it all, from surrogates being silenced during contract negotiations to agencies making more money than the actual gestational carrier, and the sobering reality that some international contracts can become nearly impossible to enforce once the plane leaves U.S. soil. In this episode, Kelly doesn't hold back. She challenges the parts of the industry no one wants to question and explains why so many experienced surrogates are walking away from the traditional agency models. This is raw, unfiltered surrogacy. Listen in for an honest conversation about what changes when carriers and intended parents are trusted to make informed decisions together.
This is Kelly Copeland. Thank you for being a friend of the family.
Thanks for having me.
So, Kelly, you've done multiple journeys, domestic and international, agency and independent. Before we get into the hard stuff, just take us back to the beginning. What started you doing this the first time?
Way back, years and years ago, I was looking into the potentials of egg donation. And at that time, it just didn't fit with my lifestyle, within my family structure. And then I missed the window for that because it's a very short window to do egg donation. So as I got older and a little more settled in my life and my path, I started looking into surrogacy. And the whole way it got brought up was that my now husband had said, wouldn't it be great if we could have kids? But when we thought about it, we knew that we didn't want to be parents again. We for sure knew that our family was complete. We didn't want any more keeper children, but we thought, wow, wouldn't that be fantastic if we could help other families have that too? And so that's how it got started.
You mentioned that your last 2 journeys were semi-independent. You have personal liaison rather than a traditional agency. What did that look like compared to the agency experience?
I felt like I had a little more control in my journey doing it with a liaison and having a little more say versus working with an agency. You know, when you start out journeys and working with agencies, one of the first steps is working through like the legalities of things. And agencies, my agency anyway, specifically asked me to stop speaking with my intended parents during this time. We were not allowed to be texting. We were not allowed to be chit-chatting about anything. And that felt really icky to me because there was an intentional divide that was happening. And when I worked with a liaison, it felt more collective, like we were actually working together. Me, my intended parents were working together to come up with a situation that we all felt comfortable with versus an agency telling me how things were going to go.
That was exactly how my experience went too. And right from the very beginning, that gave me an ick taste in my
big
mouth.
ick.
Like, we're all adults. We should be able to talk to who we want about whatever we want.
I really sent that email too, because they were like, this is the one time we are going to politely warn you. Next time, it's going to be a real big problem. And I literally responded with, I am a whole adult. We are all adults here. You don't get to tell me who I can and cannot communicate with respectfully.
Exactly. So how is the semi-independent different than what we're building here at Pineapple?
What you're building at Pineapple is different because you get to determine what pace you work at. Everybody is on the same page. And my favorite part about Pineapple is that all of the interworkings of the systems that you have to support other people, like the communication tools in there where I can reach out to gestational carriers or I can join a group chat with parents, carriers, whatever. It really encourages connection in ways that you wouldn't maybe normally find it if you were doing it alone. The big thing that I keep saying is that like you don't know what you don't know and you don't know to even ask. And so when people are communicating in such a way, it provokes people to ask more questions about maybe this could be done a different way, or maybe this isn't actually beneficial to everybody. Let's find a different path. And people share their creative problem solving there. And I think that's priceless.
Yeah, I think that even with being an experienced surrogate, every journey that I did, I learned something different. So you've cared for families in Israel and Australia. Most people don't even realize that international journeys are a thing. What was that like for you?
I loved my international journeys. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about that, or maybe they feel like they can't have that close connection, maybe that they're wanting. I never had that at all. I'm very close with all of my families. Distance, of course, plays a factor, but it never impacted connection. There's more to work out with logistics, but it really never impacted the way I was able to connect my families. I know you've done an international journey as well. Did you feel like that you were inhibited from connecting in any way?
No, except for at the beginning when we were told from the agency what we could talk about. After that, it was cool. And actually, even before we officially started our journey, they had another child that was born here in Minnesota. So I actually got to meet them before I even went through transfer and all that. People don't get that opportunity. So that was really cool. They came, they spent time with me, they spent time with my kids, with my dad, my sister. And so I think that really helped a lot to know them and have seen them physically before we even got into our journey all the way.
Absolutely. My first family, we were able to meet prior. So I was able to fly out for screening. At that time, I was in the clinic in Portland, and they were flying out at the same time to drop off their donation to make embryos. We were allowed to meet there and we hit it off immediately. They ended up getting married in Portland because they needed American marriage. As you know, it makes things a little easier for the legalities on this side. So they got married in Portland, and my husband and I were their maid of honor and best man. We were the only two witnesses in their wedding. It was fantastic. And we have a great relationship to this day. We've always been very close, but I agree that having that initial connection before you actually get into the meat of the journey is beneficial. Not absolutely necessary or required, but definitely helpful.
Sure, because then you're more real to each other. Like obviously, you're real, but it's different when you see each other face to face.
It makes it human. It makes it feel a little more tangible, like you can reach out and touch them versus just being somebody that you hear on your phone.
Or like, okay, I'm meeting you the first time and now you're seeing my vagina. Like,
yeah,
to exchange some pleasantries before that, that was
I always give them a big hug and I'm like, I always would tell my families, like, you just have to just know that it's going to get weird and embrace the weirdness, right? Because it's weird for everybody. It's like if you were to meet somebody straight out of the gate and be like, come on in, let's look at my butthole. Like that would take most people for a little pause, right? But not for us. That's part of the deal. That's what we're signing up for, So any connection that you can have really does help the comfort in things. And even take vaginas out of it, right? But like even tricky things that come up, health things that come up, loss comes up a lot in IVF, those things, to have people that you can have real conversations with and feel really comfortable in those vulnerable times can make or break a whole journey.
So with the international stuff, you mentioned that contracts are only valid in the States.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. That was one thing I was not prepared for, was all the extra things that I had to do for doing international. And I don't know that I would have done international if I had known that, because literally the day I got home from the hospital, they were calling me, asking me, did you do this? Did you do that? I was not prepared.
We were trying so hard to get these families to be able to get their things in alignment so they can go home. And it's like my first delivery, I had a traumatic birth and I was like in the hospital for 5 days after my delivery. And they're like, we need this. You need to go to the courthouse. You need to get the birth. These people got to go. And I'm like, I don't even know my own name yet. What do you?
I was that part I didn't like. Literally, I feel like the first 3 weeks, it was spent taking care of all of that, which is fine. But I wish I would have been prepared so I knew that, because I only got 4 weeks of maternity leave and 3 weeks weren't spent where I could sit down and rest. It was a lot. So I wish that the agency had better prepared for that. because there was no expectation set for that at all.
None. Like you said, had my agency told me, hey, just so you know, this contract is only enforceable in the States, I don't think I would have done it. I have 3 international journeys. All 3 of them have been top tier and excellent, and my parents are wonderful and deserving, and they have been so gracious and kind to me. But I don't know if I would have been willing to risk it, knowing that my contract would not be enforceable once they leave. I genuinely had no idea, and I didn't even learn about it until after my 3rd journey. I had no idea.
Wow.
My agency was like, make sure your contract is buttoned up. And at the end of it, I was like, why? They were very adamant about my contract being tick, 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 which is great. I also feel very strongly about that. But when it's all for nothing, they could just grab their baby and leave. I had no idea. It's a very big risk that you take. Lucky for me, it's worked out. I've seen it where it's not worked out. And when it doesn't work out, it really doesn't work out. It's really bad. And it's just a risk that you take when you do things like this. But the problem is it's not really informed consent when you have no idea that these are even possibilities.
Yeah. And I haven't been able to decide if that's purposeful or if they just overlook it because this is normal for them. They do this all the time.
I don't think it's from a lack of knowledge because they're the lawyers that have to deal with it all the time. But when it really comes down to it, intended parents are the one footing the bill. I think agencies sometimes are willing to not be fully transparent if it means that they are receiving yet another very, very high fee, an agency fee, right? And so these parents have to get placed with somebody, and they're all deserving to get placed with somebody, but they shouldn't get placed with somebody because they're being deceitful. And I don't think parents are being deceitful. I think agencies are being deceitful.
Yeah. I remember like towards the end when we were getting the pre-birth order and everything together, and they were saying the baby has to have your last name.
Yeah.
And I was like, now wait a minute. I'm a single mom. Both of my kids have their dad's last name because that's what we chose. You can give your baby whatever last name you want your baby. Like that's just adding an extra step because now they're going to have to go back and change their name. And so I question that. What advice would you give a surrogate considering doing an international journey?
That's so hard. I don't want it to come across as not being supportive of international journeys. Like I said, I've had 3 great ones, but do research, talk to people that have done independent journeys in international journeys, and talk to parents and talk to gestational carriers. Really, the more information you can have, the better. And if you're going to embark on an international journey, I would really stress to anybody the importance of actually getting to know these people and seeing if there's a connection there. Because if there's not a connection there, I wouldn't personally proceed with any journey, let alone an international journey, one that has extra layers of difficulty and barriers, unless I had a very strong connection with somebody. Because it's not if something is going to happen that's going to require the group to come together and problem solve, it's when. And whether that's like a failed transfer or difficulty in the pregnancy or delivery, whatever that may be, that connection, even just a mutual respect. Not everybody has to be like rainbows and butterflies, but there needs to be a mutual respect there. And I feel like sometimes that doesn't happen. And that lack of appreciation on both sides creates such a huge divide sometimes that it can make or break a journey.
What's hard about the agency model, if your agency is telling you that you can't really talk or what you can talk about
Exactly.
after the contracts are done, how can you figure that out? Because now everything's done.
Exactly. And that I believe is very intentional because their goal is to match people and make money, right? They don't really have an investment on the well-being of parents and gestational carriers and if they're feeling fluffy and good about their journey. Their goal is not the same as our goal. And our goal is to build families and have really wonderful experiences for both parents and gestational carriers, not to make money.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, you're right. It's for both people. I hear a lot of people say, well, this is for the IPs, and it is for the IPs, but we're a very important part of it and we deserve to have special feelings and cared for and all those things too, because it's not just their journey, it's our journey too. It's everybody's journey and you're doing it together.
Everybody's journey. That should always be the goal. It should be everybody's journey.
Well, let's talk about the money piece of it that nobody likes to talk about. You talked about the goals of surrogates and parents and what we're trying to do. What signals were you given about what the agency's goals were?
The very second my agency had asked me to stop communicating with my intended parents during the legal process, I knew immediately that we did not have the same goals. Their goal was to get a contract signed, and my goal was to come up with a plan with my parents that worked for everybody. And that was not the agency's goals. The agency wanted that contract signed immediately. And the less chitter chatter about it, the better. Was that your experience too? Or did you have something else?
Yeah, take on it too, but I kind of did what I wanted. There wasn't a whole lot that I felt I needed. I had originally been matched with a single dad. And so I had went through contracts with him already, and then he got nervous and backed out. And so that's how I ended up with the couple that I have, because they had initially picked me, but the timing didn't work out. Even going into it that second time, before I went in, I had made some changes and things that I wanted. Like, they said 2 weeks of maternity leave, and I'm like, no. So I had changed some things before I even went into it and added some stuff. I think that helped because they knew that was coming before we went into contracts.
I don't know about you, but for me, when I was going through the matching process, I had given a list of things that were important to me. And another indicator that my agency was not on the same page with me is that I had taken the time to really think about what was important to me and what I wanted out of the journey. And I was told that I would be matching with people that had similar wants and goals. And I started receiving profiles from families that weren't even close. And they're great families, right? But not the things that I was looking for. And I'm sure I was not the things that they were looking for. The agency was just like, oh, here, we'll just put them together. Great. Moving on, taking zero consideration into personality styles, intentions, goals, all of those things that were important to me and were important to them. And they were just trying to match anybody with anybody. And that is a recipe for disaster. Truly.
Yeah.
Like,
I actually didn't match with a whole bunch of different people. Like the first guy that picked me, I went with him. Because this might sound silly, but honestly, like when I first signed up, I didn't think anybody would pick me because I was Black. And so I was excited when people were like interested in me, because I legit thought that, I don't know why I thought that, but I did. And so I'm kind of happy that the first guy fell through, because I don't know that we would have meshed very well. I would have made it work because I had made a commitment with him, but I think it worked better. And then the second couple, we all did Friday movie nights with pizza. And so that was like our first initial connection together, and it just worked.
I think it's super common for gestational carriers to doubt themselves and feel so ecstatic when they've been chosen that they're willing to let go of some of the things that are important to them. And I think agencies prey on that, and they are not opposed to being like, well, you're actually a difficult match. I guarantee you are perfect for somebody out there. And it's, in my eyes, an agency's job to find that perfect person. And I felt that they really fell short on that, because that's not their goal, right? Their goal isn't always to find the best match. The goal is to sign contracts and get paid.
Yeah. And that reminds me of like when I asked about compensation, I had no clue where to even start with that. But you told us something that stopped us cold when we heard it, that your first journey, the agency made more than what you did. I have no clue what my intended parents paid, but can you tell us more about how you found that out?
I didn't find out for years. I had no idea. And my first journey, keep in mind, this was like a decade ago. Surrogacy was not as popular as it was today. Carriers were getting a fraction of the cost. In my first journey, I got paid $24,000. When you really think about that, it sounds like a lot of money. Except
just in the beginning, until you've gone through it, and then you're like,
until you've gone through it.
Yeah.
And you really do the math, and it works out to be like pennies an hour. It's not, people are like, oh, how nice for you. You must get paid so much money. I can, when I'm pregnant, there is no taking a break. There's no taking a pause. It's my whole life for essentially 2 years. There's testing, there's legal, there's so much that happens before you even get a positive pregnancy test. And until you get a heartbeat confirmation, you make 0 pennies. Nobody seems to understand that. You could put in 2 years worth of work. Your body, let's say, doesn't respond well to meds. You're done. You have 3 failed transfers. You're done. And you've not made a cent. You've put years of time and effort and pain and stress to your own family, and to walk away with nothing. That's devastating for some people.
Yeah. I'm thankful that everything worked out really well, all 3 of my journeys with minor setbacks. There's always setbacks, but nothing that threw us too far off of track in that way. But I just love when people are like, oh, you did this for money. No, I
Yeah.
didn't. I make more money at work, and it's a lot easier than growing a baby, actually.
Yeah. You just did this for money. It blows my mind. It's like I could go work at Walmart and fold jeans and make way more than I would being a surrogate. If you were to go off work hours, like I'm working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the greater part of 10 months. And that's if I'm lucky enough, right, to carry a healthy pregnancy. That's if I'm lucky enough that I don't have to experience a loss. I don't have to experience a DNC. I don't have some terrible pre-E or something where I'm putting my own life at risk. And that's if you're even lucky enough to be healthy enough to do this to begin with.
Exactly.
I think a lot of people don't realize how difficult it is to actually qualify as well. Agencies are sometimes very willing to spurt people through so they can get them to qualify, so they can make a match and match them with whomever they happen to have that's willing to pay that bill. It's not a system set up for success,
So how did you find out how much your intended parents paid
The
for
first one told me. And that's the part where agencies, I think, miss the mark sometimes, and where they don't want you to be close always, because when you guys get talking, you start putting the pieces together. And the agency, their whole marketing campaign was that it was like a boutique experience on a low budget. So they would be willing to cut costs. And guess where those cuts come from? Not intended parents, it's from the gestational carriers. And so when you start asking questions, they don't want you talking to other surrogates. They don't want you talking to other parents about their experiences, because then you realize very quickly, oh, there's another way to do this. Or, oh, that didn't have to actually happen that way.
Even in the support group, they told us what we couldn't
Yes.
talk about.
Even in work groups, they would delete things and manage so it just looked like all positive experiences, and no one would be able to communicate with you if you were reaching out to be like, hey, this feels weird. Can somebody talk me through this? It would just be deleted. They would just silence you.
Yeah. A lot of women get taken advantage of because they're following what they're told to do, and they don't know to question, or they're not confident enough to question, and they just want to follow the rules. Well, this is what they said, so this is the way it's got to be. And I just don't believe in that.
No. And the crappy part is like people like you and me, we were removed from those groups. I don't know about you. I was removed from that group because my loud mouth kept bringing things up like, nope, that is not correct. Nope, here's another path that you could take. Or, hey, ask this question and see what response you get. That was not celebrated there. A lot of the things that I would see is C-sections, for one, carrying multiples. A lot of women didn't realize that the number of embryos they were being asked to transfer was dangerous. I've seen surrogates that have been asked to transfer like 3 embryos at a time. I've known one that has done up to five embryos at a time. That is dangerous for both babies and surrogates. But anytime somebody would bring up like, hey, that's actually really dangerous what you're doing, it would be removed because they were exploiting her and they didn't want her to know that. They had a family that had a bunch of poor quality embryos, and it was in their mind that the more they transfer, the better outcome they thought they were going to have, which we all know is not the case. That is not ever okay. That's how octomom stuff happens. But that is just an example of how they try to keep you removed from each other. And that's terrifying.
It is, and it's the direct opposite of what they say the group is for. So walk us through what surrogate compensation actually includes, like base comp. There are other line items that first-time carriers might not know to ask about.
My first journey, my compensation, my agency essentially just told me what my compensation would be. It wasn't like, hey, here's a range that you can ask for, or here's some qualifying boundaries that we just decide how much. But my first journey, I didn't have anything in my contract regarding like if I were to be out of work for an extended period of time, who pays for that? That's a big one for a lot of surrogates. They don't know that they can put things like that in their contract. If I'm out of work because I'm pregnant with your baby and the doctor has told me that I need to be on bed rest, who covers that bill? Surrogates a lot of the time end up eating that bill. And it's like, there goes your compensation because now you're not getting paid. Now you're just breaking even to build somebody else's family.
The surrogate should never be out of pocket for anything.
It should not cost me money to build your family. And I believe that. Absolutely.
I do too, but in practice, it just didn't seem that
Exactly.
that's always the case.
Exactly. So what you're getting told and what's actually happening weren't aligning.
So what did you have to fight for that you think should have been automatic?
Until I got good with wording contracts and how I needed them to be, and until I had the opportunity to actually build one myself. My first journey, I was pregnant with twins and I had excruciating hip pain. So I would have to go get acupuncture and go to the chiropractor and get massages just so I could like live my normal life. And that wasn't written in my contract anywhere. I was very lucky to where my parents were like, no, please allow us to cover this cost. But they weren't legally obligated to do so because it wasn't in my contract. I just happened to get lucky that my parents were kind enough to cover that cost for me. But that agency had zero intention on supporting me when I needed extra things to just live my life. I don't know about you, but I needed chiropractor adjustments and acupuncture. I have a physical job. So in order to do my job, I had to take extra care of my body. And that agency had no intention. They were just going to let me eat that cost. Thankfully, I had parents that were like, oh my gosh, we had no idea. Again, we had no idea because who wasn't telling them?
Yeah, I actually did have some of that in my contract because my hips are still messed up from having my son 17 years ago. I carried my boy. I was so uncomfortable. I need to be able to go to the chiropractor and get fixed with that. I got really bad migraines with him. All I can take is Tylenol. Well, Tylenol doesn't do anything for a migraine. So I had put in there that if my doctor said I needed those things, that I would get them. I think I only got 1 or 2 massages because that's what the chiropractor and my doctor had said that I needed, but I don't even think that that was actually in my contract. So thankfully they covered that because the chiropractic care alone just was not cutting it. Had super bad headaches. I almost felt like I had to override the agency to speak directly to my parents because if I asked her, be like, well, it's not in your contract and they're already paying so much money. I thought you were here to advocate for me. So I would just ask for myself.
Exactly. That's the only way I ever got things covered. And that's why I keep going back to the connection because I had to do a lot of that work myself. Because again, I would get the response, well, it's not in your contract, or I really want you to be very careful about sounding too needy, or they're already paying so much. And they are 1,000%. Surrogacy is not attainable for a lot of people just for the financial barrier alone. They totally understand that. But thankfully, my intended parents, it was their first opportunity to be loving parents, right? They treated me in a way that they were like, wow, this is our first opportunity that we get to really take care of our children in this way, which I appreciated. It's really unfortunate that my agency didn't advocate for me in the way that my parents did. And so I learned very quickly to cut that agency part out and just speak directly with the parents because I feel like when you get the agency involved, they have the opportunity, whether they take it or not, to pin you against each other and create issues where there doesn't need to be issues. A simple conversation could probably absolve a lot of that. But when you're purposely separated that way, it makes it very difficult to do that.
Yeah, it's like the little kid game telephone. How do you even know that they're relaying what you're saying properly or the way that you would do it? I could say something totally benign and they make it seem like I'm just being this evil witch, which just wasn't the case. That's why I liked going independent because I quickly found out during that first journey that I'm always going to advocate for myself better than anybody else can.
Absolutely. Better than anybody else. No one will have your interests the way you will hold your interests.
I'm going to open my mouth and I'm going to ask questions. There's a lot of people in the world that just don't feel comfortable doing that. Kelly, you're very similar to me. We're very outspoken. We don't have a problem talking about what we need and saying how we feel, but a lot of women aren't like that. How do you think that people who maybe just aren't as comfortable speaking out like we are can help themselves?
We're naturally boisterous women and we're very okay advocating for ourselves. But the ones that aren't, they slip through the cracks. Talking to people, finding a little encouragement, having structured guidance, unmoderated, right? When it's moderated, you just get fluff, and fluff isn't actually helpful when you're trying to figure things out.
I think that's where people get the false security from an agency, because they do tell you, you need us to guide you through. We'll help you. We'll advocate for you. And it's a huge letdown when you realize that that's not what's happening. I'm sure there's good agencies out there. Ours wasn't terrible, but it could have been better. It just really did leave a bad taste in my mouth. And you see in these groups, surrogates get nothing out of going independent. And I don't believe that that is true.
I don't believe that that is true. There's a whole lot of trade-offs. I'm trying to figure out how to word this. I don't want to sound like an asshole, though. There are steps that you have to do along the way, right? We know all of those things have to happen to have a successful surrogacy journey. But there's so much gray area in there that agencies make very black and white. And I think that is a real disservice to both parents and gestational carriers, because I feel like often agencies miss the essence of collaboration. And I don't think that's beneficial to anybody. And so I think when we're able to cut that agency section out and just get to the meat of the people, the experience, everybody leaves feeling better. Typically, I think your success rates of feeling good about what you've done, parents are feeling good, connections are strong. When you have more control and you're able to work through things together versus being pinned against each other, like, oh, well, your surrogate is doing this, or your parents are doing this, and they're not supposed to be doing this. We lose the teamwork portion of it. And that's really what I think makes a successful journey.
Yeah. Agencies say that their fees cover coordination, screening, legal support, ongoing support. Having done it multiple different ways, what do they actually do that justifies what they charge?
I genuinely don't know. The two journeys that I did semi-independently went off without a hitch. And I was like, oh, so we actually didn't need this. We could have done it this way the whole time and saved my parents a ton of money.
For me, had I had that information first, maybe I wouldn't have thought I needed an agency. Like, I didn't even know that there was any other way to do it other than an agency. So when I went into my second and third journey, I was able to help guide. Okay, now we have to do this. Now we have to do that. We figured it out.
I remember when you told me you were going independent, and I was like, that seems so scary to me, because at that time in my head, I was like, oh man, you're not going to have the help that you need or the support that you need, because agencies had drilled it into my head this whole time that they were really necessary. And I would be like up shit creek if I didn't have them. And thank God I had them to bail me out. Meanwhile, I'm doing all of this stuff by myself, having real conversations with my families, working through things together. I was doing all of the things. I just didn't have the confidence that I would be okay if I didn't have them backing me up. And when it really came down to it, they didn't back much of anything. I don't know why I had that hang up.
You don't know what you don't know. And they tell you on that, this is hard. There's so much. You can't possibly do this by yourself. You have to do it this way because we're going to do everything for you. And there was still quite a bit of legwork that we had to do. So it was like, well, what are they paying for? It's a lot of money. It doesn't seem to add up to me.
No. And when I was going through that matching debacle, they just kept sending me these random profiles that didn't align with my desires at all. You're supposed to be matching me with families that align with my values. What service are you providing me? Nobody had a great answer for that.
So we know your intended parents paid more to the agency than you got your first journey. And learning that going into your next journeys, what other things were you asking for?
Things like chiropractic care, massage, acupuncture, time off work when my doctor would suggest that it was required. I wasn't staying home off of work all the time, but towards the end of my pregnancy, when my hip gave out and I couldn't function, I was able to ask for compensation for that, and not making money, just the money that I would have made had I been working. But if you don't know to ask for that, all of that comes out of your compensation. So when agencies are saying, here's your compensation, and you don't have any of those extras in your contract, that all comes out of your compensation. None of that comes out of your agency fee. Your agency isn't covering that. Either it comes out of your compensation or IPs are paying extra, right? But none of that is coming out of the agency pot.
My first journey, going into it as a single mom and not having help, I thought to ask for things that other people maybe wouldn't have thought. Like, I had a dog. What's going to happen to my dog when I have to travel? I'll ask my dad to watch him so I don't have to pay, but what if he cannot do that, So I had that in there. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to shovel. Who's going to mow the lawn? Those were all things that I was asking, and the agency didn't help me with that. It's my attorney's like, well, you should put this in there because you're not supposed to be out of pocket. And if they are going to fight us on this, then this is not the match for you.
This is not the match for you. Absolutely. Things like that. Childcare is a huge one. I've seen surrogates paying their own way to embryo transfer because they didn't know. They just thought that was part of it. And somebody has allowed them to believe that. And they're like, oh, I don't want to nickel and dime my IPs. It's not nickel and diming that. If that were their child and their child needed medical care, they would have to pay for their child's medical care.
Exactly. And that goes back to what the agencies tell us. We shouldn't be out of pocket anything.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, though, that when they keep saying you should never be out of pocket or you shouldn't incur this expense, they're not actually going to bat for you. If it's not written in your contract, and they know what's supposed to be in your contract, they know. And they oftentimes will turn a blind eye and allow things to slip through the cracks if it means that they're going to get that match. That feels really icky to me.
So when you went into your second journey with the agency, you said the first time they told you what you were going to get paid, did you have more say in what you were going to get for compensation the next times around?
They told me what an acceptable range was for round 2. Because the problem is, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that agencies will tell their parents what a surrogate costs, and they usually lowball it. It's very easy when a surrogate comes and is like, actually, nope, I'm not going to accept that. Here is my fee. And if that's more, it makes a surrogate look like she's being greedy, which is not hardly ever the case. But they just told me for your second journey, you can go up X amount of dollars. So again, I was being told what I would receive. I had zero negotiation opportunities there. And I didn't realize that was an agency thing. I thought that was an industry standard thing. I didn't know. And if you go on groups today, you'll see like, oh, in California, we get X amount of dollars, but in Minnesota, we only get X amount of dollars. And I'm like, no, you get to decide. You get to decide what your body is worth, right? Like an agency shouldn't get to decide that, but agencies will have caps on what a gestational carrier can receive. And I think that's baloney.
Sounds like in talking to you too, I'm realizing that they're not even telling all the surrogates the same thing.
No, they're definitely not. And that's why they don't want us talking.
Yeah. Somebody told me, oh, you're getting paid for pumping. I was told that you don't get paid for that. So I did it for free.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
That's a lot of work. Like you did that for free?
Yeah. But that's the thing. When they're telling IPs, it costs X amount of dollars and no extras and it'll all be taken care of. None of that is true.
Yeah, it's not.
It's coming at somebody's expense, whether that be a gestational carrier or a parent's pocket. But it's never the agency. From their perspective, it is always coming at somebody else's expense.
Yeah, it is crazy and it's sad. And I think it leaves people really jaded. And then you have the diehard agency people like, oh, well, they're doing this and they're doing that. And yeah, but I guess that's fine if you don't mind being told what to do. That's a problem for me.
After I left my first agency, I had temporarily matched with this agency. They're national, but they have different agency offices. And they were going to require me to spend my dollars, my money, and fly out to Chicago every 3 months during my journey, including while I was pregnant. I could either fly or drive, and it would come out of my pocket. And it was a requirement to be a carrier with them. And the whole basis of this was so I could receive support.
Support from who?
All the gestational carriers. I went to one of them and I was like, absolutely not. Immediately no. That wasn't covered by the agency. That was out of my pocket. And that's when I'm like, nope, I'm no longer going to be bossed around by these people. And that's when I decided to go semi-independent. Yeah. But all those girls at those meetups thought that that was normal. Nobody thought that was weird.
You don't have anything to compare it to. So if you haven't had anything to compare it to, of course that might feel normal. To me, I don't think that would be normal even my first time, but I also look for any excuse to get out of Minnesota. So
Having done journeys before, I'm like, this is so not normal. But everybody in that room thought that was very normal. And that's just one example of when you're under an agency's grip, you just follow along and other people are following along. And that makes it feel very normal. And then you're like, oh, everybody is doing this.
yeah.
Everybody is not. Everybody is not doing that. And you wouldn't know unless you had a community of people to ask or to share experiences. You would have no idea.
People are scared to go independent for lots of different reasons, saying, well, people only go independent because they're trying to skirt around the rules. What do you think about that?
This is not a way to skirt around any safety guidelines. Everybody is still following the rules. What it really comes down to is that clinics specifically really make the rules. I know that agencies can make rules, but what it really comes down to is clinic requirements. And sometimes it's difficult to meet clinic requirements, but whether we're doing this or not really comes down to clinic requirements. You can't skirt around that. Going independent doesn't mean that you're avoiding all of the necessary milestones and things that you need to make a successful journey.
Yeah, the rules definitely still apply.
There's no agency that's going to change the mind of a clinic doctor, that's for sure.
Sometimes you hear in the groups, people are like, all the agencies are declining me.
Or tell me which agency I can go to that will help me skirt around the fact that I have a heart condition. No, that's not going to happen. I think agencies like to give gestational carriers an idea that they are in control and they're making the rules and they're calling the shots. And a lot of the times they will manipulate you into thinking that. I see that a lot with people that are on mental health meds, whether that be for anxiety or a low-lying depression. They're like, oh, no agency will accept me. It's because the clinics won't accept them. And I think agencies are really willing to work with you if they feel like they're going to get something out of you. But if they know it's a hard stop, you'll never hear from them again.
I'm seeing lots of women in the 35 plus group that are 35, 36, 37. The agencies are telling them no, and they have plenty of time still.
It's because that agency only works with certain clinics. Agencies are unwilling to speak with anybody that they feel like they're not going to get anything out of.
When I started looking into surrogacy, I was on anxiety pills. I was like, maybe I don't qualify. But then as I did more research, I was reading you can be on some meds. You just have to be weaned off for 6 months. So I did that and it was fine. But I was really worried that an agency would not take me.
Yeah. And isn't that funny? And it's really the medical provider that has the final say, but some agencies only work with certain clinics. We get this idea that agencies are setting the guidelines. That is definitely not true. And if an agency is unwilling to speak with you, it means that you're not going to give them anything. They're not going to make any money off of you. So they're looking for a specific set of guidelines because they know that the clinics that they work with require those in order to move forward. So they are only wanting to speak with people that fit in that bubble. Does that mean that's the only people that can safely do journeys? No, it just means that they know that if you check A, B, C boxes, that you're going to make money for them. So they want to work with you and they want to work with you quickly and they want to seal the deal immediately because the sooner they get you locked in, the sooner they get paid. In my contract, I have it written before I'm even signing with people. I want to know how many embryos you have, what quality they are, and what they're rated. Because I want to know that I am giving myself the best chances at success. If I'm excluded from my own medical information, that I can understand. But being used as an embryo dumping ground and ruining my chances to help somebody else complete their family was a real big hard no for me. If you go on to have 3 failed embryo transfers in a row by the same family, you're blacklisted from the surrogacy community. You'll never carry for anybody. Doesn't matter if you switch families. It doesn't matter if you rematch. Any clinic will look at your history and go, 3 failed transfers? Absolutely not. She is not suitable. But what that oftentimes comes down to is really poor embryo quality. And it will look as if it's her body that has failed everybody, when in fact, it's probably really crappy embryos that had no chance at life to begin with. Having 3 failed transfers in a row, if that were to happen to me, I would never go on to carry for any family. So I had negotiated in my contract that am privy to their private health information just as they're privy to my private health information. I want to know how many embryos you have. I want to know what embryo quality they are. And I want to know my basic success rates in a journey. Doctors can tell you that, but nobody thinks that's within their rights to even ask. Do you know how many surrogates I know that I'm like, oh, what grade embryo are you guys transferring? Oh, I have no idea. Well, I didn't have any idea either until I learned that this was a thing. So I got real weird about it.
My first journey started out as twins. And in that process, I lost a second twin early on. And my parents shared with me that one of the embryos that we used had tested for something the first time they tested it. So then they had it tested again. And the second time it came out okay. But I felt that was information that I should have known, should have been told. I asked the agency, how come I wasn't told this? They'd pass the buck. Oh, your parents should have told you, or, oh, the clinic should have told you. And the clinic's like, well, no, the agency should have told you. And I feel like the agency should have told me, because what opportunity would my IPs have had to tell me that when we weren't allowed to talk about stuff? So I'm not putting that on them. They don't know. They thought it was fine because it was tested twice and they said it was okay the second time. So I don't know that they would have known to even find that that was something that they should have told me about.
I would have never thought to even ask. And that's the thing, though. Agencies are willing to keep that information from surrogates because that means that they have a match. They don't actually care if these parents want to have healthy babies. They don't actually care about the surrogate's experience. What they actually care about is a financial match. Because the sooner they get a contract signed, that's when they get paid. So they are keeping all of this information away from you on purpose, hoping that you don't have the education or the balls to ask and confront them about it and be that person, right? Like the amount of times that I've had to be that person and I'm like, wow, I really just feel like I'm being bitchy. And they'll make you feel like the pushback is somehow inappropriate. And it's like, no, I see what you're doing here. You're trying to put me in a vulnerable position and I'm not okay with it. Agencies often guide parents to exclude this information as well. We know that embryo quality plays a factor, right? It's not the end all be all, but it absolutely plays a factor. There's a term for it. It's called a compassionate transfer, where we know that these embryos are not compatible with life. And if you know that and you are specifically keeping that information away from a surrogate to make that choice of like, is this really what I want to do? Am I really up for this? They remove that choice from people. It's life altering for people and experience ending people.
You want to help people. And now, because you couldn't open your mouth, now I can't do what my heart is telling me I need and I want to do.
Yeah, because some agency is taking away the opportunity of allowing me to make an educated decision about what I'm allowing into my body. And now I've ruined my chances to ever carry for somebody again. That's devastating. And parents usually know their embryo quality. And sometimes parents choose not to test for embryo quality. That wouldn't be a match for me. I don't want to match with anybody that is wanting to transfer untested embryos. It's just a personal preference of mine, no judgments. But when agencies don't want that information to be shared, that is an immediate flag that goes up for me. That's like, why are they not wanting me to have this information? Why are they not wanting us to communicate about this stuff?
Do they feel we don't need to know, or is it purpose?
I don't think we don't need to know. I think they know that if we were to have that information, we would make different choices and we would say no. Then family would be matched and then they wouldn't get the fee. And then, I don't think it's a lack of knowledge. I think it's manipulation, which sucks. That's why there's other platforms now. That gives you a little more of the control back. The more information we have, the better choices we can make. When you don't have all of the information, it's really difficult to make a safe choice for yourself.
Let's talk about Escrow. It's pretty daunting to navigate. For someone who's never heard the word, what is it? Why does it matter? And what happens if there isn't one?
Escrow is a pre-funded account. When escrow is fully funded, it means that there's enough in escrow in that account to fund the journey without the extras. There's usually a percentage differential to where you need to fund your escrow more than you think that you will need. And at the end, usually you can take it out if you've not used it all. Chiropractic, massage, house cleaning, all of those things come out of escrow. If they're not written in your contract, you have zero legal right to any of that. And so your contract contract is really what your escrow company sees and what you are deemed eligible for. If you don't have that, you are up a creek without a paddle, and you are relying on people's basic human decency and financial ability to get you through that. Nobody should put themselves in that situation ever. You can have the best of intentions and have something happen, and now you have a really terrible situation that could have been 1,000% avoided.
It's important to differentiate third-party escrow, because I've seen where people are like, oh, we're just going to have a joint bank account, or some agencies have in-house escrow.
We had an agency with an in-house escrow, and how did that go? Not great.
Not great at all. Not to mention, it's also a conflict of interest.
That was a big thing in a lot of groups that people pointed out. You're with this agency? We heard they do things a little shady that way. But it's true, and I didn't know. I didn't think that that was weird at all.
I didn't know either, because those are things you didn't think to ask or know about. Had I known, with my law degree, obviously I could say, wow, that's not the way things should be, or even that your law firm house. That's also very unethical and shouldn't have happened.
They put you in these moderated groups, and everybody has the same experience, and it creates a false sense of normalcy. Everyone's like, oh, this is just how it is. This is just normal. But it's not. They keep you isolated in that way, and you think that it's normal for things to proceed in that manner, and it's definitely not.
When things don't go well or money's taken because things weren't handled right, that leaves the surrogate in a really hard spot.
Yeah, that ruins relationships. Let's say I have $10,000 in medical bills and you refuse to pay them. I'm going to have a certain kind of feeling about you, right? It's really, really hard not to have personal feelings attached to all of that stuff, which is why I'm such a big advocate for having a clean escrow system in place, a solid contract. So everybody's on the same page, and it never needs to be an argument. There's a third party that is evaluating and interpreting the contract and said, this is how it reads, and this is what we're willing to do. And everyone at that point should have agreed to it. So it should be a non-issue. In theory, escrow should be a non-issue. Turns out it's one of the biggest issues to navigate. And from an IP's perspective, coming up with that kind of lump sum of money, I'm sure is really unattainable for a lot of people. It is. It's a lot of money to just come up with right now. And people spend years of their life saving for this, selling homes and cars and getting extra jobs and side hustles and all of that to fund it. It's unfortunate, but that is kind of the nature of the beast. And it has to be that way to keep everybody safe. In the same way that you wouldn't want your surrogate taking from that fund if it wasn't appropriate, right? We're not taking funds out for going to get my hair done because it makes me feel nice. Am I allowed to get my hair done? Is that valid? Absolutely. Should it come out of that fund? No. It keeps everybody accountable that way. And when we go without that, it gets really dangerous, financially speaking, for everybody involved.
What's the one question you wish someone had told you to ask before you signed your first contract?
I wish I would have asked the question when I was doing my first journey, which happened to be international, is this international contract enforceable when they go home? The answer was no. I just didn't know that. I really genuinely thought that the contract that we were writing, I would have a blanket of protection, and that was going to give me some sort of leverage if things went sideways. I really thought that. That was the impression that they gave me. It's like, no, we're going to build you a solid contract. I later negotiated a whole lot more in my subsequent journeys. But the first one wasn't awful. It just wasn't enforceable with the situation that I was in because I had international families at that time. And I genuinely had no idea. I had no clue. I know that they had different laws and things over there that, was going to be like their problem. I had no idea that all of the things that we had worked on our end was also going to be essentially no the second they got on that flight and went home. I just didn't know. I assumed that if there was a problem, I would have this contract and my lawyers that my IPs paid for, that everybody paid for, I assumed that they would handle it and it would be fine. Like there's no way that I could possibly be saddled with all of this medical debt after they left. But boy, was I wrong. Thankfully, I had great families, but that is not always the case. Or maybe there's great intentions and maybe they ran out of money. It's not always negative intentions. Sometimes things just happen, major medical event, and this baby doesn't have insurance. They grab their baby, they get on the next flight, they leave. And then now this baby has your last name and this hospital thinks is yours, which it's not, but they think that they don't know. A lot of people don't understand that is that you can't just go into a hospital and have a baby and say like, well, that baby's not mine. Like there's a whole, I mean, I really, like, you can't do that. They don't care what your legal situation is in that moment. That baby exited your body. That is now your financial responsibility. And if you don't have an enforceable contract, that can get really dangerous really quickly. Even from a carrier's perspective, let's say that we have it in our contract that I don't show photos of their children online. Let's say that that's a stipulation. First of all, very valid stipulation, by the way. Without a parent's permission, I would never post anybody's children. But let's say I did. Let's say it's an international family and I'm just out here posting pictures of their children, not respecting their wishes. Good luck getting me to stop doing that. You're going to have to come here. You're going to have to get an American attorney that is going to cost you thousands of dollars. Can you do it? In theory, yeah. Who's going to do that? Nobody's going to do that. So it goes both ways. It's not just protecting gestational carriers from their intended parents. It's mutually beneficial that these contracts are working for everybody.
That's essential, pertinent information to know so that somebody can make an informed decision before they enter into an international contract. For a carrier who's already midway through her journey and she realizes that she didn't negotiate well, is it too late? What can she do at that point?
In theory, you can adjust your contract. It's really rare that that actually happens. I've seen it happen once, and that's because in this situation, it was the IPs that were willing to adjust a contract per their gestational carrier's request. But that doesn't typically happen because typically when you complete a contract, if you've learned things along the way, it's because somebody has been intentionally keeping that from you. And so in the situations that isn't the case, people are very willing to just be like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize, my bad, let's correct it. But typically it's because somebody has been keeping information from you for a certain reason, whether that's an agency. Typically, an agency is keeping information away from you and they want that contract signed so that you can no longer change your mind. You can later contest it, but it's really rare. And another thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is when you contest a contract like that, you are jumping into legal proceedings. And legal proceedings move at the speed of molasses. Good luck getting your contract fixed or whatever on there that you're trying to change before you deliver that baby. Like, best of luck to you. It doesn't happen. Is it a possibility? Sure. I've had things come up that weren't in my contract, and I've thankfully been able to have a discussion with my parents. Like, hey, my doctor says I need to be on bed rest. I can no longer clean my house. Would you be willing to send somebody or pay for somebody to come clean my house once every 2 weeks or something until I have this baby? And thankfully, my parents have been like, oh my gosh, absolutely. Not in your contract. We don't care. We're willing to do it. But I feel like I got really lucky there. I've seen a lot of people request certain things. And especially if there's an agency, the agency shuts that down immediately. Like, no, that's not in your contract.
They act like it's their money.
And they will encourage you not to have that conversation with your family. Like me, I'll just talk to my dads and be like, hey, here's what's going on. If you'd like to help or can come to an agreement together, but agencies will just shut it down. They'll be like, well, it's not in your contract. Okay, well, you didn't tell me it was supposed to be in my contract. You gave me this contract and told me this was solid. You didn't tell me that I should put A, B, and C in there. And they're like, well, too late.
Right.
Sorry.
I think that's also where that group legal plan can come in because I don't know that everybody always realizes this. The attorney you hired to do your contract, like that's their job. That's it. They're done. Thankfully, my attorney was still available to answer questions and help me navigate through things. If you didn't have that group legal plan, who's going to pay for that?
That's exactly it. That's coming out of your pocket. That's coming out of your comp. And when you get into legal pissing matches, you just know that relationship is strained. If you can't work things out between yourselves and now we have to escalate it to legal, that relationship is trashed. It's really difficult for people to come back from that. I've actually never seen people come back from that because this is all voluntary, right? When parents allow us to be in their families in any capacity, that is because they allow us the space to do that. And hopefully it's because we've earned the respect to do that. But when that respect is out the window and now we're getting into legal sparring matches, you can just forget about it. And that sucks.
Yeah. And that's why I think having the agency as the third party in the middle can unnecessarily make things adversarial when that's just not always how things are going. I prefer if I have a problem with you or if I have a question, I'm going to go directly to you. I'm not going to go tell her and then she's going to tell him and then they're going to come back and tell me. No, it's just so much easier to just have a direct conversation myself.
Absolutely. And like you said, that agency might not be communicating in a way that represents my inflection or my tone or my intent or any of all of that is lost. You're just getting an email from a third party, dear blah, blah, blah. It doesn't feel very personable to me and it doesn't feel very conducive to conflict management. And a lot of the times it's not even really a conflict. The amount of times that I've had to say to my families, well, thank you for explaining that differently because I wasn't understanding appropriately. Or, oh, I missed that. Sometimes I don't have a language barrier with any of my international families. My two first families in Israel both speak fluent English, so I didn't have that issue. And my Australian families speak English, so I didn't have that issue. But especially with international journeys, language barrier can create conflict where there doesn't need to be conflict. Maybe it's just a cultural difference. Maybe it's a lack of understanding. But all of those pieces together get lost very easily in third-party translation. So that makes it difficult.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Family Fronds. If today's conversation left you with questions, that's a good thing. The more informed you are before a journey begins, the better positioned you'll be when important decisions need to be made. If you're interested in learning more, visit us at pineapplefamily.org. We'll see you next time.